Welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're so excited to have you. Going to give folks a few moments to settle in to our event here today. Grab the water, sit into your chair or in your standing desk if that's what you're using. I'm going to get started here with a welcome and a grounding for us in a moment. Just want to have a chance for everyone to come from their last, what I'm sure was a Zoom meeting, or from lunch maybe, depending on where you are. And yeah, get ready for our action-packed afternoon here. Thank you all so much for coming. Welcome if you're just joining. We're so happy to have you. I'm going to kick us off in a few moments here, but just giving folks a chance to settle in. And I think I will start us off here today. A quick note that this webinar is available in English and in Spanish. So it's really important when at the bottom of your screen to click the globe and make sure that you're in the channel in the language that you want to hear today's event in. You have the option of hearing it in English or in Spanish. So with that, I'm going to get started. My name is Jamie Albrecht. I use she, her pronouns, and I have the honor of managing the Community Powered Resilience Program and website here at Enterprise Community Partners and emceeing today's event. I want to thank our special guests, Dr. Cecilia Martinez, our panelists, Irma, Garcia, Flores, Dr. Kwok, and Kieran Kumar for sharing their knowledge with us in today's session. And thank you to all the people and organizations that have contributed their energy, stories, experience, and expertise to making community-powered resilience a reality. And I want to thank you all for being here. If you want to drop your name, pronoun, and location you're calling in from today in the chat, it'd be great to hear from you. We're really happy to have you at today's event, and we want you to be as much part of it as we are. So please put your questions in the Q&A, your comments in the chat, and our team will be responding to them as it makes sense throughout the event. As I mentioned, we're very excited to offer closed captioning as well as translation services for today's event. You can turn on live captioning in the Zoom panel bar to see subtitles at the bottom there. And there's also that interpretation button where you can choose which language you will hear at today's event in Spanish and English. So make sure you're in the right room. And if you're running into any trouble, please do put that in the chat and our team will work to get things settled for you. Welcome to everyone in the chat. Christine, Jody, Irma, hola, hola. Welcome to today's event. Katie, hi, it's nice to see you. So grateful you're all here. Before I pass the mic, I want to take a moment to acknowledge where we are and why we're here. Devastating wildfires, extreme heat days, terrible air quality, drought, flooding, a global pandemic, all have struck California in the last couple of years, causing a lot of pain and suffering. And climate change makes this our new normal, a reality that makes many of us, including myself, shudder at daily. The reality, however, is that these disasters don't impact me as much as others. Black, Indigenous, people of color, seniors, those in rural areas, people in affordable housing and mobile homes, people with low incomes, those experiencing homelessness, immigrants, and people with disabilities suffer the most during disasters due to systemic oppression that has put them in the most vulnerable places. For example, where they live, what they live in, and what resources they have to survive. This is a lot of people, and they're tired of having to be resilient, tired of surviving traumatic disaster after disaster with little changing in between, and tired of being left out and left behind. But this doesn't have to be our new normal. There is a saying in disaster planning that there's no such thing as a natural disaster. Disasters happen because of the practices, policies, and processes put in place by people in power. And blaming them on nature is absolving those of us in power of our collective responsibility to shape the built environment and invest in social systems so that frontline communities are no longer disproportionately impacted by earthquakes, wildfires, and heat waves. So to me, this is the good news. Disasters are not this all-powerful, indescribable force that we can do nothing about. We can do something. We can prioritize, listen to, fund, and follow the lead of communities most impacted. And our new normal will look a lot better. Today, I'm calling in from Ohlone land in what is now Oakland. Native American tribes have stewarded what is now California for countless centuries, and they still breathe, live, and raise their families here. And they hold practices that keep land in harmony with nature, including cultural burning, which recognizes that fire is necessary in keeping forests healthy. In 1850, the California legislature passed a law that forced Native Americans into servitude and criminalized the practice of cultural burning, which was replaced by fire suppression, which is the main fire management practice we use today. However, the state of California is making progress to ask tribes for their support in using cultural burning practices, and we're making progress in listening and learning from Native American tribes here in the state. And I hope that this is the future of what's to come. Community power resilience to me represents this new way of preparing for and recovering from disasters that listens to the communities most impacted and those who have come before us so that all have safety, dignity, and decision-making power before and after a disaster. It's about communities doing what they do best, showing up for one another in the ways in which the powers can be that can support that. So without further ado, I want to move into our program so we can hear about the amazing people leading this work in every sector and the tools we have available to make this easier. I want to turn it over to Jimar Wilson and Heather Hood from the Southern and Northern California market leaders of Enterprise to describe the vision for this work, where it sits here at Enterprise, and the possibility of a new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome to our launch of Enterprise's Community Powered Resilience California program. I'm Heather Hood, the Vice President of Enterprise's Northern California office, and I'm really delighted to be here with my counterpart in the Southern California office, Jimar Wilson, and some members of our teams. We can have a world where things are different in California, like Jamie says, wherein we can collaborate to ensure people with low income struck by disaster have the power to recover and remake home in ways that make their lives even better than before. This is a 90-minute program heartily full with great speakers, content, and big reveals of parts of our new website. The website, we're very proud of it. It offers tools and tips for centering frontline communities in disaster planning and recovery. And we're delighted to have partners here too, to witness it and share it, people who've inspired us because their stories are emblematic of how and why we need to do this work. Jimar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm happy to be with you all. I'm extremely proud to lead Enterprise's work here in Southern California as the new market leader, 6 months in. Both of our talented local teams are very, very committed to making equitable disaster planning and recovery a priority in California. We've heard from our local partners of the urgent need to step up our support of strategies that lessen the impacts of climate change, ensure safe and resilient housing, reduce displacement after disasters, and make recovery equitable. We at Enterprise, along with our other partners, are committed to growing the field through our grant making and capacity building, developing tools that meet the needs of frontline communities, and supporting transformative policy. The work fits in Enterprise's national priorities that reflect the urgency of protecting the people who live in affordable housing from the harmful effects and impacts of climate change and disasters. Heather?
Our Community Powered Resilience program began in 2017, just after the Tubbs fire in Sonoma County. And after witnessing firsthand the barriers that frontline communities there face in accessing funding and support, in 2019, Enterprise convened 150 key stakeholders in partnership with the San Francisco Federal Reserve to listen and learn from leaders in the field of disaster planning and response. We listened and we learned. And since then, we've continued to engage dozens of community-based organizations, government agencies, philanthropic partners, and others to better understand the challenges that these communities face and what can be done to address them. And that's what brought us to today's program and launch. We're trying to figure out how to create programs and policies and tools that can be useful the next time something disastrous happens.
In Southern California, we've already trained dozens of housing and community development organizations on disaster preparedness and response. We provided them with practical tools so that their organizations can prepare themselves and their staff for a changing climate and future disasters, including pandemics. We know that scaling up and expanding this work requires collaboration between sectors, investments in frontline communities, and impactful policy. Today, we have a dynamic and amazing mix of speakers who will offer their experiences and expertise on why these ingredients are so important and how this program can send us in the right direction. Heather?
Thanks, Jimar. Well, it's my great honor now to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Dr. Cecilia Martinez. Dr. Martinez is the Senior Director for Environmental Justice at the White House Council for Environmental Quality. In this role, she facilitates the coordination of the whole of government and environmental justice agenda for the Biden administration. I'll say the Biden-Harris administration. Previously, she was the Executive Director of the Center for Earth, Energy, and Democracy, an organization that she co-founded. Dr. Martinez also previously held positions as Associate Research Professor in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Environment at the University of Delaware. She has led a variety of projects to address sustainable development at the local, state, and federal level. Her work focuses on the development of energy and environmental strategies that promote equitable and sustainable policies. She has been doing this in a durable, reliable, sustainable way for a long time. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Martinez to the virtual stage as she shares her perspective and a call to action. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Martinez. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Heather. It really is an honor to be here with you all to talk about this very important topic. I have to say, I am very honored actually to be in this position, and I want to at the outset just acknowledge that this position that I'm in at the Council for Environmental Quality, called the Senior Director for Environmental Justice, is a product of a long struggle from environmental justice communities for a very long time. And I don't take that responsibility lightly, nor do I believe that this is an individual position. This is a position of the community and the people. And we certainly hope, me and my team, certainly hope that we can continue to advance the goals of environmental justice in the federal family. So I want to today, I want to share with you the administration's priorities with regard to climate change and environmental justice. It is a historic moment, and I know we all know you and others have already spoken to the disproportionate burdens that Indigenous, low-income communities of color have faced both today and historically. Those extraordinary challenges have been exacerbated by the existential crisis that we know is the climate crisis. And we know the climate crisis has been a long time in coming. It just didn't pop up in the last few years. It is the product of a long series of public and private decisions that have been made over the course of history of this country. And I know I am in some way preaching to the choir, but I would be remiss if I didn't at the outset just state that the evidence is out and it is clear that the climate crisis is one of this century's biggest environmental threats. I know that seems obvious, but just imagine where we were 10 years ago in terms of acknowledging that whether or not climate change was real. And the consequences of climate change are already being seen through changes in the natural environment, such as modifications in species migration patterns and loss of biodiversity, shifting chemical composition and air quality, and a whole host of other known and, most importantly, as yet unknown impacts to the environment and to our community. And yet the consequences are also being felt in the human environment as we witness increasing frequency and severity of weather-related disasters in California and around the country. And the reason that I became involved in environmental policy and climate policy to begin with is the particular concern that the impact that environmental policy and climate crisis is having and will have on our environmental justice communities, those communities that have historically been the most vulnerable. Indigenous, communities of color, and low-income communities. I don't need to state, but I will, what we know from many of national and international reports. A 2017 United Nations report from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs presents a very clear picture of the impacts on climate change, in addition to the IPCC reports, and particularly what the impacts will be on our communities. The fourth National Climate Assessment, released in 2018 and prepared by a team of more than 300 experts, predicted that climate change would continue to disproportionately affect our most vulnerable communities in both urban and rural areas, unless we act to address this through our institutions and our systems. This interrelated nature of the climate crisis and social inequality requires us to tackle them together. And that is what we see in President Biden's Executive Order 14008, entitled Tackling the Climate Crisis and at Home and Abroad. It's no accident that the environmental justice whole of government initiatives that are outlined in that executive order is also the climate executive order. This order confirms the administration commitment to tackle climate change but also to secure environmental justice by spurring economic opportunity for our most vulnerable and underinvested communities that have been historically marginalized and overburdened by pollution and underinvestment in housing, transportation, water, wastewater infrastructure, healthcare. We all know that these have been the challenges of the past. But in EO 14008, there is a particular initiative that I think is critically important and transformational, and that's the Justice 40 initiative. The Justice 40 initiative calls for 40% of certain federal investment benefits in clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transportation, affordable and sustainable housing, pollution reduction and mediation, training and workforce development, and development of clean water systems. That 40% of the federal government's investment benefits in all these areas land with our most underserved, underinvested communities. That is a whole of government approach to advancing environmental justice. I know that we all see Justice 40 as transformational. In my personal view, I don't think there has been an initiative of this size and magnitude and scope since the 1960s and 1970s, war on poverty. We need to acknowledge that climate change is a factor across sectors: housing, transportation, water, wastewater, all the elements in all the sectors that you all work on. And that historically there have been systemic biases in the way in which those federal investments and other investments have landed in our communities, such that some communities have been disproportionately affected. It's that goal of overcoming that disproportionality and that inequality that drives me and my colleagues at CEQ and across the agencies to implement Justice 40 in the best possible way we can. Currently, where we are in Justice 40 is we have asked every agency in the federal government to report to us what programs would be covered in their view by Justice 40. Now, remember, the buckets are anywhere from energy and energy efficiency to pollution remediation to housing to climate. So it's an interagency, all of government approach to understanding what is the range of programs that we can bring to bear to affect and improve our communities. We've also asked agencies to identify in what ways they would develop a methodology for prioritizing the most underserved and underinvested communities. And we've also asked them to give us an idea of how they would begin to understand what constitutes an investment benefit with respect to Justice 40. I want to share a little bit about why Justice 40 is about investment benefits and not just direct investment into our communities. Of course, investment benefit does include direct investment, but there are a variety of infrastructure investments that may not be geographically located in a particular community, but the benefits and the services of that infrastructure or that investment should and could be felt by our most vulnerable. Particular examples are perhaps renewable energy projects that may not be directly located in an underserved community, but by virtue of their development and implementation, they will displace a coal-fired generation plant that has been polluting a community for many years. That investment benefit is very real to that community and is important, but it's also imperative that we get that right, that we understand and make sure that agencies get that benefit calculation correct and right so that the communities will feel the full benefit of that investment. And that's what agencies are being asked to do. And lastly, agencies are being asked to identify if there's anything regarding their program that will require legislative action with respect to their implementation in Justice 40. Sometimes government programs have legislative requirements that obviously they must follow. And it's important for us as an administration to know where those are and what we can do to advance and help support legislative action so that these programs can fit in to Justice 40. So in a nutshell, that's where things are at with Justice 40. I just want to say that a really critical and important component that we know and we have heard from across the country, from our constituents and from environmental justice leaders, is accountability of Justice 40 and agencies that are implementing. And towards that end, we are also developing a scorecard that agencies will be monitored and evaluated against so that we can judge progress and be able to identify where there are challenges to implementation. As I said before, this is transformational. It requires wholesale rethinking, strategizing about how programs will be implemented in our communities and what kind of resources communities themselves will need in order to effectively participate and access Justice 40 investments. And towards that end, I think it's critically important that agencies are beginning to look at and develop what are the technical capacity issues that our communities feel. How can we better support communities to be able to be real participants in the Justice 40 initiative in all matters of decision making? And what partners and allies do we need to build in the philanthropic community, at the state and local government? How do we build that collaboration and partnership in a way that will help advance and make sure that our most underserved communities will have access to the resources to be able to effectively participate in Justice 40? That to me is the most exciting. That's what I did before I came to government, was try to figure out how we can put resources where they are most needed. It's going to take more than federal government to achieve Justice 40. It's going to take state governments to acknowledge and understand how they can distribute their investments and funding. It's going to take the private sector to help supplement. It's going to take local governments to be in line with Justice 40, but most importantly, it's going to take our community to be able to stand up and have a voice for themselves. After all, that's the basic EJ principle. We speak for ourselves. So with that, I thank you very much for this opportunity to be able to share all this information with you. We're excited, and as always, would love to hear from you about any way that we can be doing Justice 40 and any of the environmental justice initiatives better in the administration. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. It's an honor to have you with us, and so appreciate you sharing your experience and the work that you've been doing in the White House, and we're so honored to hear it straight from yourself. And I so appreciate the connection that you made so clear between disasters and climate change. Like, these two things are such critical pieces, one on each other, and we need to work really hard to address both of them because it's a vicious cycle of climate change and disasters, and so we need all of the resources to work on both. And just to reiterate, I think one of the key goals of community-powered resilience is the collaboration piece that you mentioned at the end of different sectors working together to make all of this happen. So I'll leave you with one question from me here. And, we have a lot of folks on the call today in different sectors. So what's one call to action you would leave everyone here with today in contributing to a more just and equitable climate world? What do you want to leave the folks here with today?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that first and foremost, and what I always share is no matter what professional life that we are in, whether we're in government or whether in a community-based organization or in the private sector, that we really need to make sure that we are present and listening to those that are most affected by what we do. And I think for me, that's been even more critical as I enter government and know that it's very easy to become disconnected to the reality of what your decisions are. So my primary call to action is obviously to help align and make Justice 40 the best possible initiative that we can that will actually make a difference in our communities, but that requires all of us in all of our professional areas to be listeners first and foremost to our communities about what they need. It's not always easy, and there's not one voice. There's multiple voices at the community, sometimes in conflict with each other, but that's what diversity is, right? And I think we need to always keep that in mind, never stray very far from the reality of the communities where our decisions are being most felt.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to move us along in our program and take this opportunity to thank you again, Dr. Martinez, for being with us. And this is the part of the event where I'm going to unveil the Community-Powered Resilience website that we've created in partnership with local government, philanthropy, and community-based organizations here in California, really dedicated to serving these three groups before and after disasters. I want to respond to Kendall's question in the chat because I think it's very related here, is that when Enterprise went up to the North Bay after the 2017 fires, what we heard over and over again is how challenging and tricky it can be to access information about preparing for mitigating disasters, how to recover and rebuild, how to access funding, what are the tools and resources available. And this is even more challenging if you're in a community that maybe English isn't your first language. And so what can we do to really make this information accessible? What can we do to provide information to everyone free of charge, and as clear and plain language as possible. So while showing a website today might feel like it could be a tad boring, I hope that you all might get excited about this new tool being available to everyone in direct response to what we heard from folks dealing with disasters over and over again, and the work that we've done to try to democratize this information and put it all out there in one place. I will say that the website is a living document. It is a work in progress. It's not finished today just because we're going to share it with you. And it's really a matter of everyone here and all of our communities contributing to the website and continuing to make it better. So I think the other thing that's really exciting about it is that the website itself is just a tool. It's just a beginning of the Community-Powered Resilience program. And our goal really after today is to launch a program that really brings the website to life. And we hope to work with all of you on trainings for the material that's in here, as well as bringing a lot of the recommendations to our frontline communities to life. So with that, I'm going to share my screen now. now and show you all our website. If someone could come off mute and let me know that they see it from one of our lovely tech support, that would be great.
You can see it.
Perfect, thank you. So on the screen here is our Community Powered Resilience website. It's communitypoweredresilience.org. My colleague Sally is going to drop that in the chat so you can play with it at your own leisure. But I'm just going to do a little bit of a walkthrough right now. The screen has kind of California green mountains with a rainbow. It says ensuring all Californians are safe from disasters on the top page. And it kind of looks like maybe a storm has just passed. That's the vibe the photo is supposed to bring. And up at the top here, we have some main navigational tools that'll bring you to the key parts of the site. I want to highlight that we do have the ability to select what language you want the site to be in. The caveat being that it is Google Translate, so it's not perfect, but it's a start. And our goal is to one day be able to hire translators to really bring this in the correct, perfect language of the languages, those that are most spoken in California. So that's a goal of ours, to one day get there with the help of some extra funding and make that a reality, because we know that Google Translate isn't perfect. So we also have a glossary, which has a lot of really the technical tools that we wanted to break down for folks. I'm going to scroll down a little bit further to bring folks to some of the main sections of the site. I do want to give a shout out to the North Bay Organizing Project and all the contributors who have made this site a reality. NBOP has been critical in making the content of the site and supporting us along the way, and really making sure that this website is serving frontline communities, especially those in North Bay. So a huge amount of love for the work and energy that they've put into this and the work that they do in general. Check them out if you haven't already at nbop.org. We have here the next portion of the site. I scrolled down a little bit, are what we've called stories from the front line, which are 3 stories that you can read that describe what it's like for someone managing a disaster. So the first one on the screen here is a photo of a Black woman in a wheelchair whose name is Mira, and their experience living in an apartment that's susceptible to earthquakes in Los Angeles. And so there's a purple button that you can click and read more of Mira's story and what challenges that they're facing during before and after a disaster as someone living in an earthquake susceptible building in a wheelchair. There are 2 other stories, one that is about heat exposure in the Central Valley, and another one that is in the Sierra foothills around wildfires. Those stories are around are named Juan and Paula respectively. And so if you click here on the yellow box, you can see Juan's story. It's a yellow box that has a photo of Juan in front of some farmland. So I will move on from here, but those are really beautiful stories to check out when you're on the site yourself. I'm going to keep scrolling now, and I want to highlight that there's a section on the site that says take action. One of the really key components of this website is to not focus so much on just read. We really want people to put what they're reading and into practice and into action. So we have a few actions here that you can take, and there's a button in the right-hand corner that says view all actions, where we have a number of actions that you could take, you or your organization can take. And this is a section of the site that we really want to build out with your support, adding actions that you think make sense, advocacy opportunities that you want to highlight to this community, opportunities to support frontline communities. The term action is open to things that we want to lift up for people to take part in. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more, which is the Join Us section. We definitely want this to be a collaborative effort with all of us, and would love to have your email so we can stay connected in this work. And I hope you'll sign up after today so that we can continue to work together on bringing community-powered resilience to life. Finally, we have a green box here. I scrolled a little bit further that has 3 other boxes in it that have an opportunity for you to click either on getting started, pre-disaster, or post-disaster. So we've broken down We've written original content pieces that you can read if you click on each of these sections. Getting started, the Getting Started box is really to orient yourself to disasters, some of the important government policies that really influence how disasters work in this country, the understanding of what we mean by frontline communities and the people most impacted. So this is a great place to get going. And then pre-disaster, there's a pre-disaster box and a post-disaster box where you can learn resources, tips, and tools for preparing for or mitigating disasters in the pre-disaster category, or in post-disaster, how do you rebuild and access funding after an event. Examples of these types of tools in the pre-disaster category is how to write a mitigation plan, how to prepare for extreme heat days, and in the post-disaster category, you might find things like how to engage in a community visioning process after an event, how to access government funds, or how to reduce displacement after a wildfire. So those are examples of what you'll see there. There's a white button that says view all resources, and if you click that, you can see everything that's available on the site. The last thing that I want to highlight, and scrolling down a little bit more, is that we have case studies that we think are amazing work that we want to highlight from the folks on the ground who are doing this work, and great examples that we want people to know about. So the one that you can see here is UndocuFund for Disaster Relief, which is an amazing fund of emergency mutual aid that serves people who are undocumented, because those who are undocumented are not eligible for FEMA assistance unless they have a minor child in the home who is a citizen. So the North Bay Organizing Project and their partners created this fund to support communities who are undocumented so that they can recover after a disaster. So that's a great case study that you can read about here. And there's a button here that you can click to view more when you're playing around in the site. So the last thing that I will share is if you go down here, I mentioned this already, but my call to action for you today is that if you're interested in hearing more about this work, please put your email address there. You can sign up and receive updates from us and really be part of the next phase in bringing this website to light. As I mentioned, we're planning to host trainings on the website content and partner with all of you to bring these recommendations to life. And I just want to give one, there are a number of shout outs that I want to give, but Dave McCary from Enterprise is on the call today. If you see him, can give him an amazing virtual high five. He has been our IT partner on this and was pivotal in bringing this website to be an actual real live website. So thank you, Dave, from all of us. And with that, I want to turn this over to move us into our panel discussion featuring amazing folks who are living and breathing this work. And Lori Schumann,
Jamie?
who has, yes.
Jamie, do you want to take a couple questions on the website real quick?
Oh,
There's a couple of interesting ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's two in the Q&A. One
Perfect.
is under the open section. It's from Pamela about tools to foster dialogue and collaboration on the website and the platform. And then if you click into the answered section, there's another question from Sally Richmond about how subject matter experts can support this work, especially those who are retired and want to make a difference.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for stopping me. I was moving right along. Absolutely. So we definitely, a big part of, to Pamela's question, a big part of this work, and I'll just read it so everyone can follow along. So Pamela's question is, do you have plans to incorporate tools in the website to foster dialogue and collaboration on the platform across sectors, or have ideas for supporting something like this via an adjacent online tool? So that's a very great question. I think it has been something that has been very interesting to us to think about ways we could have more of a dialogue, collaborative tool on our website where people could really engage in conversation. I think that's a little farther down the line for us, but we do have in the action category ways for people to contribute their own stories, experiences, topics that they want to see on the website. And so I encourage you all to go on there today, take a look around and fill in what you want to see, and send us that note. And I think we will continue to think about ways to just even make that even more of a live dialogue experience. But I think what we're really thinking about to address this topic too is to really bring the website to life in more events like this. Convenings Enterprise has a lot of really amazing connections with government and community organizations and philanthropy. And so we really want to be a convener of these types of events and bring people together. So not as so much as an online tool, but in a COVID world, maybe online tools like meeting virtually and things like that. But it's definitely to have an actual online tool for communicating is definitely something that we're thinking about, and would love to hear folks' ideas if you ever want to send them my way. And I see that, Lori, did you want to chime in? Live event here.
Not yet, not yet.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So I wanted to get to the next question from Sally Richmond, which was for Dr. Martinez, but I will take it here. So it says, has there been any thought about how to support local activists in smaller local and state jurisdictions which may not have the bandwidth to expand this critically important work? How can subject matter experts from the US support this work, especially those who are retired and want to make a difference? How can trust be built to support local partnerships to move this work forward? Such great questions. I love these. And I think this raises such an important question of the reality that so many jurisdictions don't have the extra capacity to engage in this work. And I think that's one of the goals of the site, is to really bring that that reality to the forefront and making sure that there is a very limited capacity for extra work, especially in areas, in more rural areas or areas that don't have as much funding to have staff. And so this may seem like a really simple answer, and I'm sorry if it is simple, but I think one of the things that I've learned a lot about is, just sending an email to whether it's a person in an office or on LinkedIn or something like that, and just saying, hey, I'm here, I'm this person, I want to get involved, I'm interested, actually does really work. I've sent a number of cold emails to organizations along the way, expressing interest and support, sharing what I'm good at, and have had a lot of luck being able to communicate and work with different organizations that way. So definitely encourage that, and don't be shy. But I think this is a huge part of our work that we really want to do with this website and this program, is really serve as a catalyst for bringing these groups together and serve as a place where all of these different sectors and folks like yourself and other subject matter experts can come and be part of it. And I always say I want to have a disaster club where we all know each other's names and email addresses. So that's the ultimate vision, and hopefully something that will come out of this program. And as far as trust, I think what is the great line that I think a lot of folks say is move at the speed of trust. I think it's a long game of building relationships and showing up over and over and over again. And I think that's all something that it's a good lesson to all of us, I think, too. That's kind of the work that we need to do, is keep showing up over and over again, and just doing whatever needs to be done, even if it's taking notes at a meeting. I think that's the important piece. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you again, Sally, and Pamela for your questions, and Sally Greenspan for bringing them to my attention. I'm going to push us a little forward to our amazing panelists, and Lori Schumann, who is a Director of Resilience here at Enterprise, long-time resilience lead for us and an amazing moderator, and you're in beautiful, amazing hands with her and our panelists. So Lori, I turn to you to welcome our panelists to the stage and moderate this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It is truly an honor to be with so many of you today, especially following the keynote by Dr. Martinez. It was, I don't know how you all feel, but I was absolutely inspired and brought to tears by the kind of vision that she's putting forward for our nation. She's translating the decades of her work into policy and programming and support. And I think in so many ways, that's what we are aiming to do through this program, is to translate the vision of the communities we serve into policy and programs that will rectify the enormous devastation that so many communities, frontline communities, have been facing now and for generations. So I also want to address that we would need all the support you can provide. If you have ideas for research, technical assistance, policy support, please reach out to us. We would love to collaborate with you. So without further ado, our three panelists are from three sectors crucial to delivering equitable disaster resilience and climate resilience preparedness to California's most vulnerable communities. We have representative from community-based organizations, Irma Garcia, welcome. Philanthropy, my dear friend and incredible leader, Dr. Alan Kwok, as well as local government. And we're so happy to be here with you, Kieran Kumar, from the Strategic Growth Council. We know that together your voices are ringing enormous strength across the state. And I would like to first ask you all to introduce yourself and a little bit about the work you do. And I'm gonna first ask Irma, if you can tell us what you're leading. It is worth noting that if all of you are on the English channel, have no fear, we are going to be translating Irma's remarks. So please make sure you're on the interpretation English channel so you can hear this if you do not speak Spanish. Irma, bienvenidos.
Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Irma García y es un placer estar aquí con todos ustedes. He participado como voluntaria de la organización El Proyecto Organizativo del Norte de la Bahía, NBOP, bajo la Red de la Respuesta Rápida y el Equipo en Defensa de los Inmigrantes desde el 2017. Ahora estoy sirviendo como presidenta de la mesa directiva de la organización NBOP. Con los incendios del 2017 aquí en el condado de Sonoma, el equipo en defensa de los inmigrantes recopiló muchos testimonios y experiencias vividas de nuestra comunidad inmigrante indocumentada. Y gracias a este trabajo, se crearon varias recomendaciones que se han compartido en el condado de Sonoma para que sean incorporadas en todos los albergues de este condado durante los desastres o en esta pandemia. Y ojalá y se pudiera llevar a cabo en el estado y a nivel nacional. Gracias.
Muchísimas. Alan, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Kwok, and I'm the Director of Climate Disaster Resilience for Philanthropy California. And it is such an honor to speak with all of you here in the indigenous land of Kumeyaay, also known as San Diego. it is with tremendous pleasure to share with you what we do, as well as how we as a sector is supporting our most frontline communities. So first of all, I really want to say it's been a pleasure to speak with, on behalf with all of you, Lori, Irma, as well as Kirin. And we here at Philanthropy California, we are a network of over 700 plus philanthropic institutions and groups and individuals here in the state of California, contributing to over $5 billion plus in grants and investments in the state of California, as well as nationally, internationally on a yearly basis. So my work is really to advance our philanthropic sector to address both disasters as well as to address and support climate resilience. And we do this by, one is educating our funding communities around what are some of the emergent issues that are facing our frontline communities as they address the day-to-day challenges from either from COVID-19 to climate impacts, whether that's from wildfire smoke to heat waves to drought. Second, we connect our funders to each other, as well as to nonprofit agencies, as well as government officials, and those that are have a stake in this space. And then third, we coordinate funders. Our role is really to coordinate funders, so there is reduced duplication of funding, as well as more impactful funding to address many of these challenges that we're seeing in frontline communities. And finally, we really want to advocate, as Dr. Martinez said, many of these disasters are not a result of, as well as Jamie also talked about, disasters and nature, they need to be decoupled, because disasters are a result of decades as well as centuries of inequitable policies. So how can we as a sector advocate for changes, to our inequitable policies? So the advocacy is definitely a huge part of our work, and I can share a little bit more, during this session. So thank you again, and I'll pass to Lori as well as to Kirin.
Yeah, happy to take that up. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Irma. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is amazing, incredible work. My name is Kieran Kumar, and I'm joining you all from Sacramento, which is the ancestral homeland of the Nisenan, Maidu, Miwok, and Miwok peoples. I serve California communities as a program manager at the California Strategic Growth Council, overseeing a portfolio of work which we kind of refer to as our equity and government transformation portfolio, with a focus on building capacity within communities as well as state government. The California Strategic Growth Council, or SGC, is a state entity under the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, which is housed within the Governor's Office. And we are known predominantly for our very large funding programs, which reinvest cap and trade revenues back into communities and their projects like the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, as well as the Transformative Climate Communities Program. And then my role at SGC is a lot of the back end or upstream work that goes into enabling communities to access and implement dollars for community priorities. We focus on technical assistance and capacity building within under-resourced communities to develop the leadership and vision, planning and policy environments, and then the pipeline of projects that will enable communities to be more resilient to change. And then our focus with this work is also in support of building power to enable frontline communities and historically marginalized communities to be at the forefront of decision-making and the kinds of investment that shape their communities. Without community informing how investment is made, we really stand to replicate practices that have perpetuated harm in the past. And then historically, this work has focused on providing technical assistance for applicants to funding programs. But over time, our understanding of this work has really evolved, recognizing that if we're just focusing on providing technical assistance to applicants, we're missing a huge swath of California communities that aren't even at a level of readiness to be thinking about putting forward, integrated climate and community resilience and housing strategies, and are really just triaging issues on the ground. And so to formalize this work, we're kicking off this month actually a process to develop the Regional Climate Collaboratives grant program that does a lot of this work around capacity building. The goal of that work is to enable communities to more effectively access funding with a focus on self-determining solutions, recognizing that communities historically have already been telling us what needs to happen. And then that work would fund collaboratives on a multi-year basis to really support administrative costs around not just informing practice, but building network capacity to implement long-term strategies in communities that tackle our climate crisis. And those collaboratives would focus on network development, connecting necessary players, informing policy change, and really leading project visioning in a way that reflects community priorities. The idea is that communities that have been successful in accessing state resources and even federal resources have all shared the benefit of having networks of partners that they can bring to bear on these kinds of projects. And we really want to address that kind of inconsistency across California with this funding work. And then just to close, zooming out a bit, in doing capacity building work for the last couple of years, we've really found that one of the biggest challenges that communities face is simply a lack of knowledge around what resources are out there and what funding programs they can tap into. And so I just want to lift up the work of the that we're here talking about today to really equip folks with an understanding of what's out there and what folks can tap into. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. I'm going to dive right into a question that follows what you just stated, Kirin, about a building power in communities, and thinking about what Dr. Martinez said about setting the vision that the Biden-Harris administration has set with Justice 40. This is a national vision to support the resiliency and sustainability of the most disadvantaged Americans, the most disadvantaged communities. So I'm also thinking about a community in Southern California called Nealon, California. Half of their community was destroyed by, half of the housing in the community was destroyed by fire. And Jamie and I have spoken with leaders from that community and OEM. What are the challenges that will come up in building power in communities like Nealon? With regards to the work you do, and Irma, I'm thinking I'd love to start with you, porque qué desafíos surgen en la construcción de poder en las experiencias de las comunidades y el trabajo que haces. What are the challenges?
Muchas gracias. Ustedes mismos lo acaban de ver. Uno de los desafíos es la justicia lingüística. Y esto lo voy a compartir y espero no ofender a nadie. Siempre piensan que cuando una persona no habla inglés, uno es el problema. Y no es así. Es el sistema que está creado para beneficios de los que hablan inglés. Un ejemplo ahorita es que ustedes que hablan inglés hablan así. Pero ¿se han pensado ustedes a pensar en el intérprete que tiene que pensar en inglés y traducirlo al español, que toma ese tiempo, tal vez de un segundo, que se pierde la información? Pero como yo no hablo inglés y ustedes sí, entonces yo tengo que hablar despacio, tranquilo, para que el intérprete tenga tiempo para interpretarte a ti, para que tú entiendas. Pero enfrente de todos ustedes, si yo pienso en el intérprete para que el mensaje llegue a ti, tengo que hablar así, lentamente. Y enfrente de ustedes, como yo estoy pensando así, voy a ser la que no sabe. Pero como ustedes hablan, ustedes saben lo que están diciendo. Y ese es un desafío que desde que he estado participando en las organizaciones no lucrativas, en la comunidad, en las juntas de los supervisores, en las juntas del concilio, se ve y se siente que uno es el problema. Ese es el desafío más grande que nos estamos viendo en este website que acaban de poner. ¿Hay fondos para pagar a la interpretación? o tiene uno que abogar y abogar para que haya fondos, para que se logre esto. Si no hay interpretación, ¿cómo va a llegar el mensaje? En el 2017, una de las cosas más graves que afectó a la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada fue el no tener ninguna información en español. Después de 2 o 3 días empezaron la información. La justicia lingüística salva vidas y creo que todos tenemos que empezar desde el principio en nosotros mismos. Cada vez que uno habla, pensar en el intérprete y pensar en los demás para que el mensaje llegue. Otro desafío grande, la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada, lo único que le queda es, después de un desastre, es ir a las organizaciones no lucrativas. ¿Por qué? Porque las organizaciones son los que pueden ayudar a la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada, porque FEMA o el gobierno no los incluye. Si las organizaciones no lucrativas no tienen suficientes fondos, entonces la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada no podrá ser ayudada. Y si los programas o el sistema de las organizaciones no lucrativas tienen fondos, desafortunadamente la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada es ayudada una o tal vez 2 veces, cuando la recuperación toma de 2 a 3 años. Es importante poner a los ciudadanos y a los indocumentados en qué nivel están y cuáles son los beneficios y cuáles no, y cómo poner esa balanza, la palabra equidad, para que todos sean incluidos, porque no es culpa de ellos un desastre. Y el tercer desafío es cómo poder trabajar en la comunidad, en las organizaciones, en la filantropía y el gobierno para llegar a estas personas, viendo a preguntar, ir a la comunidad, preguntar sus problemas, porque yo no puedo votar, pero tú sí. Entonces, ¿cómo vas a votar por mí si no sabes mis necesidades? La mayoría de las organizaciones deciden por mí detrás de un escritorio. No, vamos a la comunidad, vamos y preguntemos, vamos y veamos cómo viven, vamos y descubramos qué da el gobierno a las comunidades inmigrantes indocumentadas, qué da las organizaciones y por cuánto tiempo, y cuál es el proceso y necesidades de estas comunidades. Gracias.
Dr. Kwok, Kirin.
Muchas gracias, Irma. Thank you so much for what you have shared. And what you have shared really highlights some of the challenges that we are seeing, as well as opportunities that we see here, in the philanthropic sector. I just want to share a little bit of the context as to where philanthropy has been going, in the last few years. When it comes to disaster philanthropy, the majority of the last disaster money goes into disaster relief. So more than 50% of disaster money goes into relief. Very little money, probably less than probably 5% goes into prevention, mitigation. And then the rest will, usually go into recovery. When it talks about climate money, when you talk about this whole world of climate change and climate dollars, only 1.3% of philanthropic dollars for climate resilience goes into BIPOC-led, as well as BIPOC serving organizations. As Dr. Martinez said, who actually is being most impacted and most at risk of these climate risks, especially here in California. And where are the money going? They're not going into the communities that will be most at risk and most hit. And so that is a major challenge that we see. And why is that so? I think one is we always talk about whose vision is it to drive disaster or climate resilience? Everyone has a vision, but the vision of many of the communities that are more at risk and most impacted by these disasters have often not been at the table. So therefore, they have not been included in any of the planning process. And I think we also see that there is a lack of funding for many of these community-based organizations and frontline organizations that serve our most disadvantaged or marginalized communities. We are not seeing enough money go into these organizations because, there is less lack of trust of BIPOC leaders, historic lack of trust by BIPOC leaders. There's a problem of diversity and equity here in the philanthropic sector. And so we are really we are talking about this huge system, of philanthropic sector that was we always say here in the sector, we built our money in the sector through the backs of our most disadvantaged folks. And now we're really trying to say, how can we ratify that? How can we actually change the course of philanthropy so that we are actually, addressing, we are righting the wrong of the past. And I think what Irma also said is in a disaster and climate risk situation is who is a worthy survivor? As Irma said, language justice is just one of the many challenges that we see. And I think it's a symptom of our inequities that we have in our system. So I think for, in our sector, in philanthropy, we have a huge uphill battle of really getting more funders, both institutional groups as well as individual funders, to really direct the resources to our most at-risk and most impacted communities. And these are the communities that we know are rural communities, our undocumented communities, our immigrant communities, our low-income communities, our Black and Brown communities. So this is where we are seeing as our challenge, and hopefully there'll be opportunity. So, with challenges, there are also opportunities where we can support these communities.
Thank you, Alan.
I think I can be super brief on this point, specifically the challenges that many small and historically under-resourced communities face, especially in building power around climate resilience and informing climate resilience strategies, is the fact that in many of those communities, it's often just one individual who's carrying so much of the water around establishing the community's priorities and then advocating for action on those priorities around community resilience and climate resilience and air quality and climate change, and these topics that mean things to us, but don't often mean anything to somebody who is struggling to put food on the table or who is working, multiple jobs and going to school at night and who doesn't have access to a vehicle, right? So I think we need to right size the issues that we are funding, the issues that we are writing policy around to the lived experiences of communities. And that's how you build a bigger tent of community-based organizations and of individuals to be building power, to be coalescing, to actually develop community vision, turn that vision into policy and systems change, and eventually access dollars to implement programs. And so I think for me, the biggest challenge that many of the communities are facing is a lack of network capacity, but those networks aren't non-existent. We just haven't invested enough time and energy and money into building those networks such that they can then shift power to inform this work.
I'm struck by the discussion and working in the disaster recovery space as well as the resiliency space. The funding that is supposed to be aimed at restoring and repairing communities, that work in part should be happening before the disaster strikes, because once the disaster strikes, you're in a triage mode. I know we're joined by the Red Cross. There's some members from the Red Cross here. Everyone who has been through disaster knows how difficult and traumatic it is to recover. And particularly, Irma, I'm thinking 2 years ago when you were with us and we talked about the absolute, level of trauma inflicted upon Latina and Latino communities in the shelters, of women and families by folks that were thinking that they were doing good, but they actually did more harm because they didn't communicate in a way people could understand. And they also did a lot of harm in the way that they treated disaster victims. So building power in advance of the event is critical. And what can we do? What are the activities that need to be taken now and the actions to build the resource and capacity before the event occurs? We have philanthropy, we've got community leadership, and we've got the government perspective here. What do we need to do right now? What's the moment?
I can share a little bit from our perspective. I can speak for all philanthropy, but this is where Philanthropy California, where we stand. One is power building is important. We need to change policy. When I talk about power building, yes, we hope to change policy, but what does power building means is really capacity building of our frontline organizations, not only to address already the day-to-day challenges, or as well as opportunities, but also build the capacity to be at these decision-making tables. And we need significantly more resources in philanthropy to support frontline organizations like MBOP or many other organizations that are like that across California to do the work. We have different legislations, that were passed because of frontline organizers in these communities, really raising awareness, calling their legislators on a day-to-day basis to push for changes so that we can pass policies and bills that protect our farm workers, that protect our frontline communities, and that provide culturally as well as linguistic services to them, not only in disasters but also in recovery. But also, I think more importantly is like equipping and providing capacity support for these frontline organizations to attend as well as to leverage all of these significant amount of federal as well as state dollars coming into the that's coming down the pipeline to support the communities for disaster as well as climate resiliency. Many of these planning, I would say, I have attended many of these like local government, community engagement sessions, who actually can attend these, not people, who are actually on the front line fighting, day-to-day, battles. They just don't have time. But I think it's really about how philanthropy can support these community-based organizations and the capacity so that they can engage with the local legislators or elected officials as well as their local government agencies to be in these planning conversations.
Alan, can I just say, I think one piece though, to me, is we need to push for living wage and more pay equity, so that households have more ability to have the money so that there's not this constant shuffle between 2, 3, 4 jobs. That to me, I just want to cite, I think is an important thing that the marketplace can do.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for these community organizations. We're not talking about one, we are talking about if we can network a huge movement of community organizations and leaders, calling the representatives, because there are huge significant of dollars, that are pending right now at the federal government, whether that will be the Build Back Better, bill or the bipartisan infrastructure bill. There is significant, investment for social safety net, and we need to address these social safety net because they're all interconnected to how well prepared these communities will be in the face of climate risk as well as disasters.
You're in, Irma.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump.
Muchas gracias. Oh.
Please go ahead, Irma. Okay. I just wanted to jump in. I had some thoughts, and then Lori, you had made that comment about the underpinning social elements of this work, and it reminds me that the reason that frontline communities are impacted more significantly than other communities in the face of disaster is not just because they're the closest to the urban-rural boundary and are affected by fire, but it's because they score the lowest in every single determinant around the social determinants of health. And so as we talk about climate resilience and disaster preparedness, we have to also be looking at not just lived experience, but long-term socioeconomic and sociopolitical factors that are defining under-resourced and disadvantaged in communities. The point I wanted to bring up to this question around what we can all be doing, and then the piece around, coming together now so that we are resilient in the face of disaster. I don't think there's a better story than looking at underscoring the point, Alan, you had made around the importance of relying on community-based organizations than what we've seen with the evolution of networks that have formed around the census push, that evolved into get out the vote, that evolved into COVID testing, that evolved into COVID vaccine, that is evolving into COVID recovery. And then what's next? And I think a big fear for me is that funding gets pulled from those kinds of organizations that have come together to underpin disaster recovery and disaster preparedness in our communities. And those networks don't sustain into the future. And so I think what we need now is a doubling down of investment in those kinds of individual organizations and networks to continue into the next thing. And for me, the next and largest disaster that we're facing coming out of COVID is the climate crisis in California communities. We already have networks stood up that can do direct service provision, as well as inform policy and strategy that we need to continue sustaining investment in.
Irma.
Muchas gracias. Miren, quiero compartir un pequeño ejemplo, un gran ejemplo que el proyecto organizativo realizó. Durante los incendios, pues tuvimos, antes de los incendios del 2017 teníamos muchos problemas con el control de renta, ¿verdad? Las rentas estaban subiendo mucho. MBOP tomó la responsabilidad y fue afuera de la comunidad, y al escuchar sus necesidades de lo que dañaba o les preocupaba más a la mayoría, fue sobre las rentas elevadas en Santa Rosa, California, pero sobre todo a las familias indocumentadas. Tenían que vivir amontonadas las familias y aún así tenían de 2 o 3 trabajos para poder pagar la renta. Fue entonces que MBOP identificó que la manera más eficaz para resolver el problema era trabajar en la creación de una ordenanza para el control de renta. Desafortunadamente, no logró pasar, porque las agencias y asociaciones de dueños de apartamentos tuvieron mucho más dinero para invertir en su campaña engañosa en control de renta. Imagínate, si se hubiera logrado pasar el control de renta, las familias indocumentadas no hubieran sido impactadas tan desproporcionadamente como están siendo afectadas en esta pandemia por el hecho de estar viviendo tantas personas amontonadas. Pero ¿qué pasó? No hubo suficientes fondos para que MBOP ganara, no su campaña, la necesidad de la comunidad. Bueno, siguiendo este ejemplo de MBOP, una manera que se me ocurre de resolver esto es que el gobierno y las organizaciones deberían impulsar y crear leyes, normas y programas que fortalezcan el apoyo y la ayuda para las comunidades más vulnerables durante los desastres, integrando a la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada. Y la filantropía tendría que patrocinar este financiamiento, todo el proceso hasta lograr que se realicen esas leyes y normas. Y de esta manera, entonces, sería un mejor papel para llegar a ayudar a las personas que lo necesitan. Es muy importante que las personas que deciden por nosotros o por la comunidad vulnerable, primero pregunten directamente antes de decidirlo ustedes mismos. Y los testimonios y experiencias de nuestra comunidad inmigrante indocumentada deben ser escuchadas y así hacer que el sistema los incluya sin necesidad de pedirlos. Gracias.
Thank you, Irma. We have a couple questions coming in. We're not going to be able to answer them all, but I wanted to point out one question that Bob Stilger has asked, which I think is really important when we're talking about the conditions of our communities and where we are before the event. Bob asked, what does it mean by restoring and repairing communities to get back to normal after an event? What we think of the normal is, and is already broken. It's already broken. We know that. So how do we use the fires that are happening across the state as a springboard to build new, healthy, and resilient communities which leap beyond the old normal? I mean, is there an opportunity to leverage the attention on the fires right now and the drought to build a new normal for our communities? And where can we start to figure this out? Is there an avenue? Is there a window? Is there a point we can use? And this is where our website and our vision for this program is coming into play, is how do we tool ourselves to inform the right agencies, the right funders, the right community groups to step up, and what do we need?
Right. I think that conversation around returning to normal, I think it's important to reframe how we talk about fires. We have had fires in California for millennia, and now it has turned into very catastrophic wildfires or wildland fires because of, hundreds of years of fire suppression policies and people moving, in the wildland urban interface we have, and those are the people who move to these at-risk areas are the most disadvantaged or low-income folks because they couldn't afford, living in the city. And all of these are interconnected, and and I think it's important to in philanthropy, philanthropy is very reactive. We react to, what we see on CNN. We see, babies or families, evacuating their homes and, and just trying to escape the fire. We need to change this paradigm from let's do something, when a disaster hits, to, okay, let's prevent communities, from getting, from being hit by disaster in the first place. And I think it is, in Irma's case, in Sonoma County, these same communities get hit over and over again. I've been in my role for 3 years, and I talk to NBOP or many other organizations in Sonoma County every year because they're just getting hit every year. We really need to stop this cycle of losses and really think about what can we do as different sectors to proactively stop, to stem these losses that we are seeing. And I think, for us at Philanthropy California, we are really trying really hard to start getting philanthropy to broaden their philanthropic giving, not only when a disaster happens, not only when they see, poor images of families happen, on CNN or any other, media, but really thinking about what can they do to proactively prevent and mitigate all of these different risks that we are seeing, in communities. And it is a really hard sell because people can't measure the success. They can measure unless there's a disaster, but we don't want disaster to happen in the first place. So I think it is, I'm hopeful, I am seeing opportunities. I'm hopeful that, people are coming to the senses, or funders coming to the senses. It's like, yeah, they have been in this cycle over and over again. Let's do something different. Let's be more proactive. Let's be more innovative to address, our climate as well as disaster risk.
And Alan, I just want to say, we have folks on the call from FEMA and from a variety of agencies. That's one of the pushes of this administration, is to support community resiliency before an event. I am being given the 1-minute warning that we have to wrap up. So I'm going to ask everyone in the final moment of our panel discussion, can you give us a prayer for the next year, what you would like to see happen, where we can support at Enterprise, some word of wisdom, some dream that you can leave us with.
There's a lot of,
I know.
There's a lot to pack into hopes, dreams, prayers, into just this conversation. And just to close the last one, I think we have come to talk about disasters as disasters because they impact people. And I think if we are to shift our thinking around this, we need to think about why people are in the face of harm when these things happen. And so I come from a background in built environment, but I'm trying to shift my focus to process. And I think for me, the most important thing moving forward is to invest in building the network capacity in our communities, such that when disaster happens, we don't bring community-based organizations, tap them for their resource, their knowledge, their ability, and then we go back to traditional power structures that is top down, that is deciding what happens in communities. We need to hold on to we need to hold on to that capacity and continue to support it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kirin. Alan has ceded his 1 minute to Irma. Irma, please close us out with your vision.
Muchas gracias. Lo único que yo quiero que se quede con esto, no vamos a volver a hacer igual. Esto nunca va a pasar. Esto desde el 2017 hasta ahorita, estamos cargando muchos problemas en nuestra espalda y no hay sanación, no hay resiliencia. Bueno, hay mucha resiliencia, pero no hay ese proceso para recuperación en las comunidades vulnerables y en este caso la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada. Yo lo único que quiero es que empecemos cada uno de nosotros a hacer conciencia, empezar a darle ese lugar a esas personas. Y si tú que ocupas un lugar en una organización, trata de llevarlo allí. Poco a poco podremos ir cambiando. No podemos cambiar el mundo, pero sí podemos cambiar el sistema donde tú estás. Podemos ir encaminando a incluir a estas personas dentro del sistema, y las organizaciones no lucrativas y la filantropía trabajar para ayudar, para crear esas leyes donde se incorporen. Yo lo que quiero que se vayan es que me ayuden a lograr un sueño. Quiero, y me anima, y mi emoción y mi entrega y en la lucha es algún día la comunidad inmigrante indocumentada estar integrada en el sistema como cualquier ciudadano, sin importar sus estatus migratorios, por lo menos en los desastres naturales o en esta pandemia que nos está atacando muy duro y que no tenemos voz ni voto, pero sí tenemos a ustedes. Gracias.
From your mouths to God's ears. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Irma. Thank you, Alan and Kirin, for leaving us with such an amazing words of wisdom to go on. I just want to close us up here. Gracias a todos por participar ahora. Un placer conocer ustedes. The last thing I will say is basically that I'm so grateful that you all spent this hour and a half with all of you. I want to spent this hour and a half with all of us here. I want to thank everyone that made this day possible, our panelists, our keynote speaker, and the amazing interpreter team that made this event rich and possible. Thank you to you, interpreter team. If you want to put your contact info in the chat, you're amazing and would love for you to share who you are with the group if that is comfortable to you. This is just the beginning of an amazing program here at Enterprise. I hope for all of you, you will get in touch with me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Mi correo electrónico es en el chat. Y thank you for everything. I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your day and week. And the last thing I'll say is for an advocacy perspective, I want us all to be pushing so that people who are undocumented have all the same rights as citizens. And I hope that that's the future that we're walking into in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you all for being here, and may you have a restful and healthy rest of your week. Thank you.